Welcome to Public Health America, a weekly program produced by BronxNet in partnership with Mercy College. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Here on Public Health America, we speak with experts from an array of specialties across the liberal arts and health professions to provide you with not only the best science, but practical tips to live a healthier life. We also celebrate what studies have long documented, namely the unparalleled value of a liberal arts college education by setting the stage to pursue a career of your choice, increase lifetime earnings, and engage in civil debate. Our experts will share decisions they made and support they received that helped them to beat the odds. By sharing one or two life lessons, their stories may provide you with the inspiration and method to realize your dreams. This is Public Health America. Welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. It is my pleasure to have with us today Dr. Curtis Henry, Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at Emory University School of Medicine. Curtis, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. So I know for a bit of time now you've been doing some cutting edge and really important work on obesity. It's widely known that rates of obesity have increased significantly over the last, 10, 20 years. You'll know better than me. And that there are many negative outcomes associated with obesity. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so what really got me interested in obesity is just, like you said, just looking at the United States population. And then as a scientist started, digging into the statistics surrounding the increase in the percentage of Americans that present with obesity. And to make a long story short, it's actually estimated that by 2030, so essentially 8 years from now, greater than 50% of the U.S. population will present with obesity. Now, the one thing that I also began to appreciate as someone in the public health space as a scientist is that obesity is associated with a number of solid and blood cancers. So in my laboratory here at Emory University, we really study the relationship between obesity and blood cancers. I'm a trained immunologist, meaning I study how your immune system works. And what we're really focusing on is how obesity impacts your immune system's ability to eradicate blood cancer cells and how that could subsequently impact the efficacy of these new emerging classes of drugs called immunotherapies.
That's great. So let's start at the core. Let's start at the etiology. I've heard so many different explanations for the cause of obesity. And when you talk about 50%, 1 in 2 of the US population by 2030 meeting criteria. So I guess here are my two questions. One, define obesity. Like, what is the definition that you have to meet in order to be considered medically overweight to the degree of obesity? And what's causing this sad explosion of obesity in the last 10 or so years?
Yeah, so, we'll go strictly by the CDC's or the Center for Disease Control definition, which actually varies between pediatric and adult populations. When you talk about kids, and when you say pediatric or adolescents, we mean those between the ages of 2 to 19 years old. What we're essentially referring to is the body mass index, which for kids is calculated based on the weight and the height and is age adjusted. For adults, it's essentially the height and the weight. And for obesity to be defined, you actually have to have a BMI of greater than 30, greater than or equal to 30. And so, it is age adjusted for pediatric populations, but it really, at the end of the day, is your height distribution to your weight distribution that gives us a number to kind of try to understand, are you in a healthy range? Now, it's not perfect, but it is what we're commonly using today. Now, regarding your second question.
Wait, Curtis, hold on. Let me interject because so just to help our listeners understand. So if I'm 6 feet tall, I'm a male.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have to weigh to be considered obese? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So usually if you're like 6 feet tall or so and you're over, let's say 250 to 270, you're starting to become in that overweight range. However, if you're greater than 270 based on that height distribution, now you're starting to get into the obesity range.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm a woman and I'm 5'5"? What do I have to weigh to be considered to have my BMI be 30 or over?
So yeah, if you're 5'5" and let's say you're about 170 to 180, you're considered in the overweight or obesity range at that point.
Got it. And I think you alluded to this. Does age matter? I mean, I get the pediatric, not pediatric. That I get. For adults, is there any bearing of age?
So actually, once you are over the age of 19, we don't factor in age. I'll double down on something that I said earlier, that BMI is actually what we have, but it's actually not the best metrics. And so we're starting to move away from obesity, from BMI to more things like DEXA scans, which is actually factoring in also your muscle mass, because we know that as we age, the body does change, muscle mass changes, and that can impact, what the scale basically reads out. And so there's a concerted effort in the public health space to move away from just using BMI as the metric of, is a person healthy regarding weight? But it hasn't taken, full scale yet. So hopefully in the next, decade or two or so, BMI will be used less, and there will be more sensitive techniques and approaches and definitions that we'll use moving forward.
Got it.
That's a great question.
Got it. Okay. So let's get to question 2, etiology. I'm sure it's multivariate, or that would be my guess, but what is the current day knowledge of the factors that predict obesity, and why there's been such a enormous rise in obesity in the U.S. in recent years?
Yeah, so as you could imagine, it's multifactorial. I think everyone, or at least most people, may be familiar with the term food deserts. It's no secret that in certain underserved communities, the access to healthy foods, fresh foods are limited. You have a larger access to fast foods, not to name any particular group or organization, but essentially the diet based on location and then also based on economy can change, right? So if a person that has more access to financial resources, you can afford to go to restaurant A versus B, where restaurant A may be the one that's serving the more healthy foods, the ones that are prepared with less grease, so forth and so on. And so it's a combination of location. Certainly there's an economic impact in terms of what a family could afford, and that's going to be influenced by the occupation of the parents as well as the size of the family, so you have to be able to feed all your kids there. And then, last but not least, obviously as a scientist, there are genetic components that also influences how our body basically sees the food and how we store the energy once it's consumed.
Got it. So I want to make sure we have time to get to your research. You were mentioning that obesity might be linked to a number of conditions involving cancer and immunology. Tell us what you're finding there.
Yeah, so it's been well appreciated that obesity is associated with a lot of solid cancer. So colon cancer, some of the more nasty ones, prostate cancer, breast cancer, and a number of other cancers. So that's well established, and that's also gaining more traction. I think there's a big push in the scientific community to try to understand on a molecular and cellular level what are those relationships. In my work, we focused on a cancer group that's well less established with this link between obesity, which are blood cancers, such as leukemias and lymphomas. And so as an immunologist, one thing that I was very interested in is I came across an article, let's say in 2015 or 2016, that demonstrated that people who present with obesity are more prone to infections. And so I figured it may not just be an infectious disease issue, it also may play a role in the cancer. And that's exactly what we're finding, that obesity in general dampens your immune responses, not only to infections, but potentially also to blood cancers as well.
Got it. So what's the public health ramification of your work? Is it attacking the root causes of obesity and food deserts, or is it educating the public? Is it figuring out the mechanisms related to obesity that might predispose someone to get leukemia? Like, what's the focus of your work?
So I think it's, I actually think it's multifactorial. I feel like I need to educate people first, because I think education is very important for people to make informed decisions. And so whatever I, find in the lab, I actually try to get it out to the general public. And what I try to discuss is, everyone is intelligent. Everyone in the world is intelligent. So I try to discuss my science in a way that is digestible and palatable. And so what we want to use from a scientific standpoint, or what we want to understand, is what are the factors that are making your immune system weak? And can we target those factors to make your immune system strong and subsequently able to better eradicate the cancer cells? And so the ideal would be to use that and combine that with these immunotherapies, which we are now using to treat cancers that are almost impossible to treat.
So we have just about a minute left. And with that time, I'm going to ask you what I think is a really difficult question. When I think of dense urban settings that have food deserts, or whatever the correct language is these days, that's affecting 150 million people in the United States. I mean, like, I don't even know what the number is. Like, it's tens of millions anyway, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
In New York City alone, goodness knows what that number is, let alone Philadelphia or anywhere else. So how does one, we could study immunology of a morbidly obese person and then find out that there is these 3 amino acids that are making the difference. That's great. And I mean that sincerely, but at the end of the day, don't we need healthier eating, and we need access to better food? I mean, how does one get that done?
So you actually hit at the heart of exactly how I think about this. I think it's a twofold approach. The reason why I started to get into obesity-based research is because I realized that either for no fault of the person, we need to provide better medical care for these populations. So that's one thing. I don't think it's fair to someone who may have had a situation either inadvertently or purposely put on them to not have the best healthcare. So that's one angle. But the other thing is, again, like you said, educating the people and starting at the root of the problem, which is better, relationships with food. So I know in cities, it could be a little bit more difficult because of space. But one thing I'm starting to do and starting to educate myself on, as well as others, is the ability to kind of grow some of your own food. Even if you're living in an apartment, if you have a balcony or just the sun is shining through a window, you can actually try to grow a few natural things that you use on a regular basis right in your own space. And if there's also public spaces in the cities that can be used to plant gardens. I used to live in Denver, so there was a really beautiful project where they used to go around and just plant gardens in neighborhoods that were underserved, and it was open access to all of the community. You can just go there, get your corn, get your tomatoes, get your cabbage. I think, programs like that are very effective, and they also alleviate the cost burden that can come with actually being, in a very tough economy that we have now, and maybe not having the financial resources to adequately provide for your family like you would want to.
Sure. Those sound like great programs and great ideas. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Curtis Henry is going to tell us a little bit about his education and how his undergraduate education set the stage for this exceptional career that he has. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll be right back.
built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at bronxnet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
TV news, radio reports, and newspaper headlines in the 1970s and 80s misrepresented communities in the borough of the Bronx. Then, something transformative happened. By, for, and about the Bronx, BronxNet was born.
We are BronxNet!
BronxNet provides media education,
opening the doors to competitive careers in the media industry
for thousands of students in middle school,
high school,
and college.
BronxNet.
Welcome back to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. So, Curtis, we always start this part of the segment with the exact same question. Where were you born and what were some of your formative experiences?
Yes, so I was born in Sumter, South Carolina. So if anyone is down south, I have a lot of family there. So you could always, reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with someone. And so my interest in science started at a very young age. Like I got my first microscope at the age of 5. I was always one of these weird kids that was, outside tinkering and wanted to know everything about everything. And so my mom actually allowed me to make my room into a laboratory, complete with signs out in the front that said "Science is at work." And so, my mom nurtured me, even though my room smelled like really terrible because there were things getting dissected at all times. But she just always supported me, come from a single parent home. My mom just basically said, we can do whatever we want, my sister and I, and we just took that to heart. And I knew I always wanted to be a scientist. And so that's why I chose this path. And so I, took my talents, so to speak, all my hard work, because you have to work hard in life, regardless of what you do. If you want to be good at it and really contribute to society, you have to, put in the work. So I put in the work, and then I was very fortunate to enroll in Florida A&M University. So for those of you who may not know about Florida A&M University, we also call it FAMU. It's an HBCU, or historically Black college and university, located in Tallahassee, Florida. We also call it the highest of 7 hills. So it's a great institution with a great scientific program. And then they also provide tremendous financial support to the students that attend. So I was very fortunate to get an undergraduate degree in molecular biology, a minor in chemistry, and then also come out debt-free because I actually had an academic scholarship to attend FAMU.
That's great. I love both stories. I love the story about your mom. Obviously, must be an extraordinary woman, and that's just so great that she provided you that opportunity to have the science lab, at home.
Yes.
Which is great. That's fantastic. With my daughters, it's more of like art and ballet lab. that's happening, but it's all good.
Yes.
So let's talk about FAMU. So you obviously had a great experience there. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any challenges you might not have, because you had a scholarship, and that's great. Like, were there any challenges you faced? Tell us, a little about a mentor or two. Just what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I also, want to press upon the audience and whoever's listening that there's always challenges in life. It comes with being human. I tend to try to look at challenges as an opportunity for growth. And at FAMU, it was no different. No situation is ever perfect, even though it can be a perfect experience. Everything comes with, a little trial and error. And that's just, again, part of being human. I would say one situation that was a little testing for me was, again, not to name names, I had the fortunate opportunity of working at a research facility on campus. In my mind, I'm like ready to go, get me in there, let me do some science. And I don't know why I wasn't given an opportunity to actually do the experiments. I requested several times, and I was always told one thing, but that never manifested. And so that was really frustrating, because I thought I joined this team in order to get lab experience, to get research experience, working with microscopes and tissue culture and all of the stuff that I was practicing at home as a kid. And so, but, again, I'm not the type of person that quits anything. I always see everything to the end, just because I know there's a valuable lesson to learn. And in this case, I learned that, if you're going to have to, if I want to be a scientist, there's going to be some things that that may be unpleasant. Also, too, if I wanted to pay my bills, I need to work this job, because they were giving me a paycheck, and that was useful. And so, that wasn't the most pleasant experience, but, I had to go to class because I used to work in a field. So I had to go to class dripping sweat with mud, and everyone used to get up and move away from me, because I'm pretty sure I didn't smell so good. But you do what you have to do in life in order to be successful. And so, I'm happy to say that after that experience, my next year, my sophomore year, I was able to work at the NIH under the tutelage of Gary Emory, working with neurological diseases, which was one of the most affirming experiences of my life. And I said 100% I want to be a scientist after I worked at the NIH, no doubt.
That's such a great story. So, you're saying at least three things that I want to highlight and underscore. One is that not every undergraduate experience is going to be floating in salt water. There's going to be some that are not as good. But you had the fortitude. You knew you had to pay your rent. You had a job, and it might not have been perfect, but you were going to see it through. And I think that that's so important, and such a good lesson to model, which you clearly have done and do. You did your things got better, and you found and then you also did an external type of internship or some kind of experience with the National Institutes of Health. Obviously, it's tough to do much better than that. And that experience, was also critically formative in you realizing, what, this is what I really want to do. Now, what's tough for a lot of young people, and I know, and I'm perhaps you can speak to this or not, but if you're working three jobs, with or without supporting a family, sometimes doing those external experiences are tough. But the thing is, if you can do them, because it's a game changer. And clearly, Curtis, for you, it was.
Yes.
So let's move on. What was the next step after undergrad?
So the next step after undergrad was the doctoral program, the PhD program. So, again, this is opportunity to educate, hopefully, our youth. There's a misconception that you have to get a master's before you apply to a PhD program. You do not. If you feel like you're ready, just apply. I felt like I was ready, so I applied. I was fortunate enough to matriculate into Wake Forest University School of Medicine in the Department of Microbiology and Immunology. Fell in love with immunology. Actually, at FAMU, I took my first immunology course, and I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Doubled down on that thinking and on that passion at Wake Forest. Had a great PI in Elizabeth Hiltbold. And so, again, your mentors are very important. So I've been always blessed in my journey to have very supportive people around me, starting with my mom, Barbara Cooper, my sister, Regina Shipman. But my entire family, my community has just been exceptional on this science journey. I am extremely blessed and fortunate and humbled by, everyone that I've encountered with I've encountered, particularly the people at Wake Forest.
Sure. No, great school, great experience. So after Wake Forest, residency?
So actually, if you have your doctorate, you do there's many things you can do, but for an academic track, you do what we call a postdoctoral fellowship,
Sure.
which is equivalent to a residency if you're on the medical track. And so I was fortunate to work under Dr. James DeGregory out at the University of Colorado. So I had moved west and got a chance to snowboard and hike and do all of the things that I love to do in addition to the science. So it was just a beautiful experience. Again, James is one of my biggest advocates. So spent 8 years out there before I started my lab here at Emory in 2016.
Got it. So talk about how that experience as a postdoc and thereafter, because I think for a lot of our listeners, that sort of trajectory might be a little mystical sounding. So, you went from your undergrad into a PhD program. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then you went from your PhD program to a postdoc in Colorado. Was it like a 2-year postdoc, or how long was it?
So actually, I did 4 years as a postdoctoral fellow, and then another 4 years as a research instructor, which is kind of a junior faculty member.
Yep. And were you publishing at that time?
Yes. So during this time, the main goal is to prove that you can work independently, even though you have a mentor or a PI to kind of guide you. But for the most part, it's your opportunity to prove that you can think on your own. You can do the science on your own. You can graph data. You can write the papers. You can write the grants. So, it really is an opportunity for you to prove yourself before someone says, hey, here's your own lab. Here's a whole lot of money. Show us what you can do as an independent scientist.
That's great. So with just a little bit of time left, if you were to give, and you've already given some great examples and advice, but if you were to give one piece of advice to our listeners in Philadelphia, our listeners in the Bronx and NYC about the value of an undergraduate education and how to get there and succeed, what would that be?
Don't let nothing stop you in life. Be passionate about whatever you're going to do. Understand that it will be some sacrifices, but those sacrifices allow you to create the environment, create the family, create the life that you want, and you only get one. So don't ever settle for anything in life. It's absolutely the worst thing you can do is settle for whatever a situation looks like. You can make life look however way you want it to look. If you're willing to grind it out, pray about things, and just keep going forward. Don't let anything stop you.
That's so great. I want to thank Dr. Curtis Henry for joining us today. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll see you next time. Take care.